Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. Um, Bismillah. So where did we stop last time? I think we stopped around here, right? Actually, we stopped at the bottom of this page, but I mean, it's also like a real, mashallah, like a mind blower. So I think it helps us to just briefly go through it again. And guys, what I also want to say is because this is like a particularly dense chapter, you get more out of it the more you kind of like participate. And I completely appreciate that, like, people will not have the time to do individual reading on this bus, and that's absolutely fine, of course. But what I do suggest is please interact with me in the session as much as you can, um, and that will help us get to grips with the kind of material that we are dealing with. Um, so I think that will just help you understand what's going on a bit better because it really, really is super dense. Um, does anyone want to just briefly tell me what we talked about last time, if possible at all? And if not, that's fine, because I want to refresh and go over the same material anyways. So I'm not in too much of a rush.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
So you said that Nuh alayhi salam, even though he was um, above his people in Wilaya, but his people also had certain openings and they were really deep into Tashbih. And so Nuh alayhi salam's message was really intense on the Tanzih, while the Sheikh Al-Akbar is saying that if he had combined the two, then they would have responded to him. And then you spoke about the metaphor of night and day versus, I forgot what it
Yeah,
was, but Batin and Zahir, I think, and Tanzih and Tashbih and stuff.
yeah. Thanks for starting us off, Nero. Allah barik fiki. So this is really weird because one of the issues that the commentators try to wrestle with and get to grips with is in what way is Sheikh Al Akbar speaking here? Is he speaking metaphorically or is he speaking literally? It's not easy to tell. And I certainly lean towards the literal side, but without negating the metaphorical layer either, because this is a chapter of what? Hayra. So, as is very typical with Hayra, what does Hayra translate into? Perplexity, confusion. This is what the chapter is about. So it would not be fitting for the Sheikh Al Akbar to be talking about Hira without demonstrating Hira in the very way this fuss is written. So one of the characteristics of perplexity is you are overloaded with a number of possible layers of meanings, sometimes all at once. And so you have to like kind of like be very patient and patiently just tease out each layer of meaning one from the other, right? So let's just go back and start from the beginning, right? Uh, this whole fuss is really a commentary on Surah Nuh, right? So the more you meditate on Surah Nuh, kind of like the easier it becomes to follow him and what he's saying in the fuss. But the whole thing is a meditation, in some ways, on and a commentary on Surah Nuh. So he goes through the surah almost ayah by ayah, verse by verse. So this fuss is about tanzih and tashbih, right? And it's also about the problems of what? Picking one over the other and picking only one. Someone who only inclines towards tanzih, he's going to have issues. And someone who only inclines towards tashbih, he's also going to have issues with regard to understanding God and having true ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the one who combines the both, that person is a master and he is a sayyid of the affair, right? That much is, I think, pretty easy to understand, right? Just the general concepts. Uh, but then, of course, he gets into the details, and the details are where we get lost, and one gets lost often. as I think he does on purpose. So I think it's good to start off by just talking about the fact that we can read this fuss on at least two levels, right? There's two things going on. One is the story of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam and him getting to grips with his people who reject his message completely. But then there's a second level, which is the level of ma'rifah. So if you like, the first level is nubuwah, prophethood, and the second level is ma'rifah or wilaya. And it becomes clear that Qawm Nuh, they are quasi, right? Like partially. They're quasi arifin. That becomes very clear that they are master Gnostics with a few flaws, granted. And one of the things you'll find in Sheikh Al-Akbar is that a lot, if not all, of the antagonists in the Quran, name whoever you want, they have some level of ma'rifah too. And that's what challenges the prophets. And that's what they have to face, right? In their mission against these antagonists. So Fir'aun is one of them. And if you've ever talked to me about this issue before, you'll know that Fir'aun had his own fatah, and he was an arif in his own way, but a misguided one. So was the Samiri. Who is the Samiri? The Samaritan, who makes the golden calf, the ajal, right? For Bani Israel. And why is he some kind of a quasi arif in his own way? Because he's actually a kind of a visionary, a kind of murid of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. And he has his what? Own vision of the Arsh. And what does he see in that vision? He sees the angels who are holding up the Arsh, right? So one of them is definitely a bull. And then I think another one's like a falcon or something like that. No, and the third one's like a human being, and the fourth one is some other creature. Um, but one of them is definitely a bull, right? Yeah, that's a really great question, Sidi Omar. Of course, as a technical word, Arif is only the ones who obey God. So it is incorrect of me to call the ones who disobey God Arifin. But there's something else to them until we can find a word that is suitable for them, right? So yes, an Arif is someone who knows God intimately, but it's obvious that the antagonists of the Quran don't know God intimately, but they know something. So you have to give them a name. They are not your run-of-the-mill villains. They're not. Iblis is definitely not your run-of-the-mill villain. He knows a lot. But knowing a lot isn't good enough. Knowing a lot isn't good enough. But they're also not stupid. Same goes for Fir'aun. Same goes for the Samiri. So what does he see? He sees the bull upholding the Arsh, who is one of the angels. So then he says that is the God of Musa, which is a complete lie. Because the God of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam is who? Is Ism al-Jama', the all-comprehensive name, which transcends all the names. Um, it's not a thing that you can see in the angelic world or in the physical world. So then, but the Samiri, he had a vision. So what he should have done as a murid, if you like, if you think of him that way, as a murid, he should have taken his vision to his murshid. Who's his murshid? Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. And then Musa will tell him, alayhi salam will tell him what to do with that vision, but he didn't, right? So, and then ajal comes, what's the meaning of the word ajal, just out of interest?
Hurry.
To hurry, right? To hurry. And then you get, of course, in Arabic, we say استعجل, right? واحد عم يستعجل, if you speak vernacularly. And so the connection between hurrying and the golden calf, there's a very interesting connection. Any idea what that connection might be?
Like he hurried to interpret it by himself, perhaps, and then make an image of it.
Yeah, and take it even further. Because why was he hurrying? Because Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam wasn't there. Where was he?
He went to meet Allah.
But where? In Mount Sinai, right? So he was gone for how many days?
40, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Or it's 30 plus 10. So the original point was 30, but then 10 was added to it. So he was gone for 40 days. So him being absent for 40 days, right? They did not have a connection to Allah except through Sayyidina Harun alayhi salam, right? But because they were missing the divine presence, they hurried to make something in order to become close to the divine presence. So they made the calf, whose name is the thing that they made in a hurry, right? And so that testifies to one's um, strong imperfection, because what they desired, Bani Israel desired, was to enjoy God, not to do what He wanted. That's a testimony to the fact that they wanted to enjoy God. So they hurried since the time lengthened and there was no revelation, right? And so that was like a huge fitna of the period. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says pretty much that much in Surah Al-A'raf. He tells Musa alayhi salam, we have tried your people, right? And he uses the word for fitna with the plural, nahnu, which means through the divine names. So these, in any villain you take in the Quran, has some kind of ma'rif at some level. The Qawm Nuh are no exception, and it's extremely obvious with them, right? So, because they operate on a level where they have some kind of Gnostic knowledge, call it whatever you want. They're not Arifin. I know I said they're quasi Arifin. They're not, because the correct definition of an Arif is someone who has complete knowledge of his Lord and authentic, correct knowledge of his Lord that does not contradict Aqidah, right? It does not contradict Aqidah. And so he therefore obeys God. That's the Arif. He has authentic knowledge and authentic obedience. So anyone who falls short of that isn't an arif. Most certainly not the enemies of God. So these are enemies of God, right? But they have something. So you have to give it a name. So for lack of a better word, I'm calling them half arifin, right? So Qawm Nuh, they definitely have something. And so when they are interacting with Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, that ma'arifa comes out, but it's very subtle. So you have to tease it out. And that's what the Shaykh al-Akbar is doing. He's showing you where that ma'arifa lies, right? Because all knowledge is sound in its root, in the root. Because it goes back to the divine names. And if all knowledge goes back to the divine names, it goes back to God. Because the musamma is wahid, who's God. Whichever divine name you're talking about, whether it's al-hadi or al-mudil, al-rafi' and al-khafid, al-mu'izz and al-mudhill, right? Whichever one you go back to, al-muhi, al-mumit, al-nur, ar-rahman, whichever one, it all goes back to one musamma, one entity, one named entity, ayn wahida. So the knowledge that Qawm Nuh have is authentic at some level. At some level. So he wants to show you at what level that is. And it comes out in their weird interactions with Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam. And it is weird because they behave weirdly. Their behavior is weird. It's not normal. It's almost dysfunctional. And that has an explanation too, and you'll see why as we go throughout the fuss. Um, so that's one thing to say. Now, the other thing to say is that what station were the people of Nuh in, Qawm Nuh? What was their maqam? their station, their maqam was maqam Quran. Is that right? One of the things we talked about last time. They were in the station, the maqam Quran, right? And what does Quran mean?
Joining.
Joining and gathering. You can say joining, you can say gathering. So bringing together. What was the maqam of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam?
Furqan.
Furqan, which means what?
Separating.
Separation or dividing. Yes, great. And so all the prophets before Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the books that they brought, they're called Furqan. Even though there's like a specific book called Furqan, in addition to like Injil and Torah and the Zabur, for example, and the Zuhuf, right? But from the point of view of their status, they're all Furqan. But the Quran is something way beyond any of them, because Muhammad ﷺ was the only one who could bring what he brought. And that's the book called the Quran, right? But it's also a particular spiritual vision. So the Qawm Nuh, they're in maqam Quran, right? And Sheikh Al-Akbar, being the literalist that he is, right? He has what you call a doctrine of tasmiyah, the doctrine of names and naming, the doctrine of names and naming. Like if you name something by a certain name, especially if God does that, it's never a coincidence. And he gets really deep into it. So if you say that they are Maqam Quran, it follows, and Salim Sani says this explicitly. He's one of the commentators of the Fusus Al Hikam, Afif ad-Din Salim Sani. He's from the same time period of Sheikh Akbar. He was alive at the same time. If they're in Maqam Quran, then it follows that Qawm they are Ahlu Quran. That's really strange. That is really ajib. And then the Sheikh Al-Akbar, he takes this so far as to say that had Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam brought an ayah, that's like from the ayah of the Quran, one of the ayat. And the most obvious one is لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Had he brought that, they would have answered. They would have believed in him. Really ajib, very strange. Because that ayah is the perfect ayah that combines tanzih with tashbih both ways. So tanzih tashbih and then tashbih tanzih, right? And if anyone wants a refresher on that, just let me know and we'll do it like, I can send like a voice note on it or something like that. So that's where they are. Now, if Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam is maqam furqan, where do you see that in Surah Nuh? Give it a think, because the more you engage with this, the more like, inshallah, it'll become clear to you.
I really don't know, but astaghfirullah. This laysa kamithli shay, is that it?
Yeah, but so I'm talking about Surah Nuh. This is in a different surah.
I don't know, astaghfirullah.
Okay, so Surah Nuh, right? He says, I called my people by night and day. دعوت قومي ليلا ونهارا. It sounds pretty simple, right? But then once you see it, you can't unsee it. I called my people by night and day. Night and day. That's the Furqan. Because night and day is a form of separation. And then he gives you like a deeper layer of meaning as to what night exactly is and what day exactly is. But just very simply, night and day. That's a separation. Whereas in the Quran, what do you typically see? You see some kind of combination between the two.
Actually, you spoke about it last time, which is the Prophet. It's between, like in the Maghrib and in the Fajr.
Yes, correct. We did talk about it last time. Thank you very much, Lada. But
Yeah.
this is correct, right? And we'll get more into that. But let me take it a step back, just so we don't rush into it, right? Where in the Quran do you find something like this, where it's not a separation? So okay, I said sunrise and sunset, but and we'll get to that. Maybe I went too fast. But where in the Quran do you find where it's not separated? If you go to Surah Al-Qiyamah, وَجُمِعَ what? وَجُمِعَ الشَّمْس وَالْقَمَرِ. That's an ayah, or yes or no?
Yes.
There you go. Which is a reference to the Day of Judgment, obviously. And how do you translate that ayah? When the sun and the moon are brought together. وَجُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرِ وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا. What's this thing with وَضُحَاهَا?
Is it because like by duha it's not exactly like fully day?
It's not, is it? No, it's not. It's not. And then you get wal fajr, just very simply, wal fajr. And then you've got the end of Surah Nazi'at. I'm trying to recall it and at the top of my head. وَلَمْ يَلْبَثُوا إِلَّا عَشِيَّةً أَوْ ضُحَاهَا عَشِيَّةً أَوْ ضُحَاهَا. What's that? By the evening and its duha, right? Which is the rising morn, right? And then you've also got وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا, yes. وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَّاهَا. So the Quran doesn't really very frequently, if ever, does it. Maybe someone can point out other ayats. I've not memorized them all, obviously. But it doesn't really separate them, does it? Because it's not from the characteristic of the Quran to separate things. Because the very nature of Quran is to bring together. So Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, he separated the da'wah, which is the call, right? And so someone who is in maqam al-Quran will not accept a da'wah that's furqani. That's just the nature of it. And Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, he knows this. Now, we're always talking at least on two levels. If you can remember that, this fuss will not really overwhelm you that much. He's always, him and his people, they're always speaking on two levels, right? So in this case, you've got Nubuwah and you've got Walaya. So on the level of Nubuwah, Sayyidina Nuh, he conveyed the Risala. He didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong whatsoever. So please don't get confused about that. On the level of Walaya, there is something missing. He knows there's something missing, but he's not required from his Nubuwah to show it. That's not a deficiency on his part. It's a deficiency in the sense that he's not Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No prophet is him. And so the commentators recognize that, and he recognizes that. And so him being unable to bring maqam Quran and the Quran, which are the ayat al-Quraniyah, him being unable to bring that spiritual vision, which brings things together, right? He has to find another way to bring them to their level of perfection. You see, he has to do it in a different way. And so the rest of us, you see, it becomes like a cat and mouse game. One trying to outsmart the other, one trying to outfox the other. So there's actually like an implicit narrative of ma'rifah, of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam being the murshid, and his qawm being like his murids, and he's trying to guide them to their kamaliyah, their perfection. He knows that, and they know that. So that's why Sayyidina Salam Sani can say that when they reject this particular da'wah in the beginning of the surah, it's as if what they did was correct. Because it's not possible for someone who is in a state of Quran, in a maqam Quran, it's not possible for him to accept a da'wah that is furqani, right? And so what they do, they plug up their ears and they shroud themselves in their clothes. وَاسْتَغْشُوا ثِيَابَهُمْ وَاسْتِكْبَارُوا اسْتِكْبَارًا. But there's also other things going on. You see, since Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, he brings a furqan call, it's not far-fetched to say that the reaction is also going to be what? Furqani. Now, we'll get into that in a second, but why does it matter if they're maqam Quran? Because the Risala of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam entails rejecting tashbih. Rejecting tashbih, by the way, he does have a call that's tashbihi, but it's not really what they need. So in effect, he has rejected tashbih, in effect, because he only accepts like a certain kind of tashbih, a certain kind. But what's the kind of tashbih that he has rejected, that his qawm want? It's the recognition of the idol. It's the recognition of the idols. No? Yeah. No? Yeah. That's what they want. Is the recognition of the idols at some level. Now, Sayyidina alayhi salam, because of his the requirement of his message and the particularities of his own walaya, he can't do that. It's not possible. Not at all. And his own people are not going to relinquish their idols in any way whatsoever. So you've got a standoff, and they cannot meet together. The rest of their interactions, what you'll see in the fuss, is an expression of that. Does anyone want to say anything right now? And then we'll just read the text again. Yeah, tell me.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So how are the people at the level of the maqam of Quran when they are not recognizing tanzih and they focus a lot on the tashbih aspect? How are they bringing both of those things together? How are they at the level of the Quran, which, as you said, brings things together? I just need some clarification on that point.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. It was one of my questions too when I was reading the fuss. It does not mean that what they're bringing together is harmonious. It's an imbalanced bringing together, but it's still a bringing together. So, by the way, they don't reject tanzih completely. That's the point. But they rejected enough to reject the Risala of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam. So, if you like, you can also, maqam Quran refers to a maqam of perfection, but it can also refer to a different thing as well, which is just the act of bringing together. So, in order for you to have perfect vision, you have one eye that's furqani, you have one eye that's Qur'ani, one eye that separates, one eye that brings together. So it's just an expression for a spiritual state and vision of the world in which you see the divine interconnecting with other things. It doesn't mean you're perfect. But they had the aptitude and the propensity towards perfection, which is why Shaykh al-Akbar says that had Nuh alayhi salam brought that particular Quranic ayah, they would have responded. And that would have balanced them out. But a balance was not possible. So the only thing Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam could do to cure them of their spiritual malaise is to bring a risalah that's extreme, because they are extremely ill. So you have to bring the opposite extreme to balance out the extreme tashbih that they're in. So that's what it means, Sana. Tell me if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, we'll just start reading. Okay. And if anyone's just new and seeing this the first time, let me know as well. Don't make yourself completely lost or anything like that. Yeah, sorry, who raised your hand? Aitaf, go ahead, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, just, I mean, pardon me that this is my first session. Actually, I've never attended
Sure.
the previous session, so I might not really on top of what you have covered before.
Yeah.
But I mean, reading here the phrases of Quran, specifically when it says فَلَمْ يَزِدْهُمْ دُعَائِي إِلَّا فِرَارًا. Like the word itself, firara, it means like people were in a hurry, just escaping.
I completely agree, yes.
Which is really it's fascinating in a way that the refusal was not even ordinary, like we refuse. It's kind of, they were in an escape mood, in a hurry mood, in a way. So what does it mean really?
I mean, Aitaf, you've hit the nail on the head for one of the things we're going to look at. That's exactly true. Because the rejection is not an ordinary rejection. It's a very strong rejection, right?
Yes.
It's very strong. And that's not normal, and there's a reason for it. You are absolutely correct. But I advise, so also Sidi Muhammad Yasser and you, go back to the previous lessons as well. I think maybe it's just a few. It'll get you up to speed because there's a lot that's happening before we get to the actual this part of the fuss as well. There's like a whole what you call a muqaddama before that.
I'll do.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of things going on in there. But just let me pause on one thing you said, Artaf, because it just completely reminded me. So if you go to Surah Nuh, can you see on my screen, or is that not being shared?
Yeah, I can't see it.
So you can see Surah Nuh, the actual surah. Okay, fine. So
Not really, the fuss.
the fuss. Okay, so I'll just read it out. So there's a lot of things going on in the surah as well, right? It's like you said, قال ربي إني دعوت قومي ليلا ونهارا فلم يزدهم دعائي إلا فرارا, right? And he goes on. But you also, so the surah has a number of peculiar features. The more you pick out those peculiar features, the more the fuss also makes sense as well, right? So I'll just give you like a few examples. So for example, right, there is repetition in the surah, a repetition of specific words. And then since there is this repetition, you kind of wonder, why is that there? And that's not a coincidence at all, like he says, فَلَمْ يَزِدْهُمْ دُعَائِي إِلَّا فِرَارًا, right? So then he also says, قَالَ نُوحٌ رَبِّي إِنَّهُمْ عَصَوْنِي وَاتَّبَعُوا مَنْ لَمْ يَزِدْهُ مَالُهُ وَوَلَدُهُ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. So مَنْ لَمْ يَزِدْهُ, right? It's the same kind of thing, right? And so he then says later on, وَقَدْ ضَلُّوا كَثِيرًا وَلَا تَزِدْ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا ضَلَالًا. He keeps repeating تزد, right? And then he goes to the end of the surah. He says, رَبِّي أَغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيَّ وَلِمَنْ دَخَلَ بَيْتِي مُؤْمِنًا وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ وَلَا تَزِدْ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا تَبَارًا. So that's like maybe 4 times that's mentioned, 3 or 4 times, right?
Right.
Dr. Faris?
Then yes.
But it's also like, I don't know if it's, I feel like it's kind of like a double negative, but I'm not
Yes.
sure that that's what it is. But it's like, don't increase them except in this, and that's the form. It's not like increase, but he's saying don't increase them except in this, which
No,
that thing being something evil or bad, not positive.
but I completely agree with you. No, I completely agree with that. Yes, correct. I'm pointing out, why is there a repetition of the word? Of course it's something evil. It's called an imprecation. He's praying against them. Yeah, absolutely. But why is there this repetition of the words throughout the surah? Okay, I'm going to give you a second example. Yeah, of course it's a bad thing. Yeah, 100%. I mean, by the way, it's a bad thing on the outward level, superficially, but then you get into it deeper, and we'll do that later, inshallah. وقالوا لا تذرن آلهتكم, right? Don't abandon your gods, they said. Then you move forward, Nuh, عليه السلام, he says, وقال نوح ربي لا تذر على الأرض من الكافرين ديارا. لا تذر. It's the same word. إنك إن تذرهم يضلوا عبادك ولا يلدوا إلا فاجرا كفارا. لا تذر. That's repeated. That's the second example. There must be more. When you see that, you wonder, okay, why are the words being repeated? And as Zainira said, ولا تزدهم إلا, and whatever it is he's praying against them for. So there's a mystery there. And that mystery comes to the fore in the fuss itself, right? And you'll see why, right? So let's just go through this again. Can I get someone to read this? I mean, we read last time, but I'm going to do it again.
I can read.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Zainira.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لو أن نوحا جمع لقومه بين الدعوتين لأجابوه فدعاهم جهارا ثم دعاهم إسرارا.
Okay,
ثم قال لهم
sorry. So jihara is what? Manifestly, outwardly. And israra is what?
Secretly?
In secret. One is explicit, one is in secret. Is that not another Furqan? That's Furqan. I called them explicitly, clearly, manifestly, and then I called them in privately. So in other words, I called them in public. Jihadas, I called them in public. Israr, I called them in their own private households. Right? That is Furqan, right? Just another interesting point. When you think about yin and yang, for example, yin and yang are separate concepts, but if you look at the ingenious way the diagram is drawn, how is it drawn?
As one circle. They
So
form one circle together.
You've got the black and the white, right?
The one contains the other, each
one contains the other, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because you've got the white semicircle, you've got the black semicircle. It's not really a semicircle. I don't know what to call it, but then inside the white is a small black circle, and inside the black is a small white circle, right? And like the images are inverted as well. That's perfection. That's perfect symmetry. Yang contains yin, and yin contains yang. This is maqam Quran to a T. Like exactly. And they're interpenetrating. Thank you, Steve Petro. That's exactly it. With interpenetrating, yeah, you also get Fatima Harda as well, which is to do with marriage. Marriage is the ultimate bringing together in union, which is not a coincidence, which is why that belongs to Muhammad sallallahu, the perfect one who brought Tanzih and Tashbih together. This is no coincidence at all. Marriage is another topic that ties into this as well. Thank you, Zainira. Please carry on.
لو أن نوحا جمع لقومه بين الدعوتين لأجابوه فدعاهم جهارا ثم دعاهم إسرارا ثم قال لهم استغفروا ربكم إنه كان غفارا وقال دعوت قومي ليلا ونهارا فلم يزدهم دعائي إلا فرارا. وذكر عن قومه أنهم تصامموا عن دعوته لعلمهم بما يجب عليهم من إجابة دعوته، فعلم العلماء بالله ما أشار إليه نوح عليه السلام في حق قومه من الثناء عليهم باللسان الذم، وعلم أنهم إنما لم يجيبوا دعوته لما فيها من الفرقان، والأمر قرآن لا فرقان، ومن أقيم في القرآن لا يصغي إلى الفرقان وإن كان فيه، فإن القرآن يتضمن الفرقان والفرقان لا يتضمن القرآن، ولهذا ما اختص بالقرآن إلا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وهذه الأمة التي هي خير أمة أخرجت للناس، فليس كمثله شيء، فجمع الأمر في أمر واحد.
شيء, yeah, thank you. Okay. No, carry on, but it's شيء. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
فليس كمثله شيء فجمع الأمر في أمر واحد فلو أن نوحا يأتي بمثل هذه الآية لفظا لأجابوه فإنه شبه ونزه في آية واحدة بل في نصف آية ونوح دعا قومه ليلا من حيث عقولهم وروحانيتهم فإنها غيب ونهارا دعاهم أيضا من حيث ظاهر صورهم جثثهم وما جمع في الدعوة مثل ليس كمثله شيء فنفرت بواطنهم لهذا الفرقان فزادهم فرارا.
I think you're right, Znira. There's a spelling mistake there with juthathim. It should be like
جثثهم, right?
juthathim, exactly. Now, I need to go back and check. I think what this version of the Fusus I'm reading it tries to copy out the manuscript. So maybe that's what it looks like in the manuscript, right? Because different critical editions of the Fusus Al Hikam have different aims. So the aim of this one is to copy out the text as it looks. That's the way it looks like, right? It's just a minor scholarly technical thing. But yeah, you're right. That should be him. Okay, so he says it clearly in the second part of this passage, right? He, Sayyidina Muhammad هو جمع الأمر في أمر واحد. He combined the whole reality, the affair, into one, right? And so even as Sayyidina Muhammad brought just half the ayah, that would have been enough, just half, because you know how like when something is ready, all you have to do is give it the tiniest spark, and that thing will catch on fire, or it's ready to transform, right? When it's actually ready, that's all they needed, just half an ayah, and that would have been enough. And so, because they're arifin, you know, quote unquote arifin, with the caveats I mentioned earlier on, they know that when he is calling them by night, he's talking about other things too, by the way. So there's a conversation that happens between Sayyid Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun. When Sayyid Musa alayhi salam is doing the da'wah to Fir'aun, and then Fir'aun asks him, وَمَا هُوَ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ, so words to that effect, right? And then Sayyid Musa alayhi salam, he answers him, and they go back and forth. They're not just having ordinary conversation. They're having a conversation with Ma'arifah where there's like a second layer of meaning behind the words, but only they can catch the secret language they're using. Do you know what I mean? Like, for example, if there's two people, let's say 3 people in the room, and they have like a code between, there's 2 of them that has like a code between them, and the third person doesn't know that code. So like, for example, the person and the other person who know the code, one of them says, it's getting very warm in here, I think we should open the windows. But the second person knows that means something else, like, oh, like maybe it's time to leave, for example, right? They're speaking in code. Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun have that exact same code, but with ma'arifah. Like Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam says one thing, it means something else in ma'arifah. Fir'aun responds with another phrase, it means something else in ma'arifah, and they go back and forth, and they know it, but the rest of the crowd doesn't know it. So there's a saying in Arabic that goes like this. It's a proverb. It goes like this. It says, "Ani iyaki ya jara fasma'i." What does that mean? "Ani iyaki ya jara fasma'i."
It means basically that usually I'm saying something hidden or implicit. So
Yes.
you are just in a conversation, so you get to understand it. So it's kind of like when you have a neighbor and you want to communicate a message, you would make it in a way so the neighbor would understand that he is meant with this message.
Right. Exactly. So you are talking to that person specifically with a specific message. So that's what happens between Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun, and that's the kind of thing that's happening here as well. So Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, he calls people by night. So it's not just he's calling them in the night. It's not just that. But there's another meaning for night, which means it's the ghaib, right? Because the ghaib is a good night is a good reflection of the word ghaib as well. Um,
Uh,
so what's also connected to the night and ghaib are the uqul, the aql. Because the aql is that which can perceive things which are absent, right? And the ruh. Certainly the ruh is connected to the ghaib without a shadow of a doubt, and that doesn't need an explanation, right? So in other words, he called to them with respect to their intellects and their spirits. The commentators say what that means is he called them to the tawheed of their intellects and the tawheed of their spirits. فإنها غيب, right? How, by the way, guys, this is super hard fuss. So please don't take it personally when I ask you to think about something. Don't worry about it at all. But I'm going to do it anyways. How in Surah Nuh does he call to them by their uqul and their arwah? Because this is actually a reference to an ayah in Surah Nuh. He just doesn't say it.
Can I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess it is very the word used here, layl and nahar. I mean, people should sleep actually at night. So why would Nuh basically want to communicate his message when people are asleep? If we're gonna take the what they call it, the explicit meaning, we used actually to interpret that phrase as it was a continuous da'wah. But I guess looking at the meaning carefully, no, it means there is a kind of a message being communicated in different ways. Sometimes speaking to their minds and brains, and sometimes speaking to their souls, to their it's kind of speaking to the inward and outward.
Of course, yes, you are absolutely correct.
Because there is no sense actually if we're gonna look at the very clear meaning of layl, people are asleep, so why would you communicate it during night, for example? So this is how I would see it.
Yeah.
I mean, Artaf, you can definitely read it that way, by the way, Artaf. But just let me say something. Did people sleep that much in the past? People in them, so this is a very interesting point just to kind of like ruminate in your head. People in the medieval ages didn't sleep continuously at night. They slept like a few hours. And then they get up with their neighbors, hang out with their neighbors at night, and go back to sleep. Like this kind of a modern thing is like you should be asleep for 10 continuous hours, 8 continuous hours. But Allahu Alam. But he did say laylan wa nahara. If you take it as an expression, it just means it's a continuous call, which means it's an expression. It's to do with balagha. That's what you're saying right off. But also, if it's beyond balagha, he called them literally in night and called them literally by day. Who knows how they lived like 4,000 or 5,000 years ago? SubhanAllah. Even in the medieval ages, people would get up with their neighbors and hang out with them at night. So it's not impossible. Yes, Nira, go ahead.
I first of all, I noticed that another like repetition about what you said. It's also like قال نوح is repeated. قال نوح ربي إنهم عصوني, and then وقال نوح ربي لا تذر. So that's repeated. But yeah, I was thinking it's like when he says فقلت استغفروا ربكم. So first he says ثم إني دعوتهم جهارا ثم إني أعلنت لهم وأسررت لهم إسرارا. And then he says فقلت استغفروا ربكم إنه كان غفارا. And I thought that's like, for me, that is a like a ruhani call, because he's saying, when you do istighfar, it's a cleansing, because your ruh becomes more obvious and like your nafs is cleansed. And then he's like telling all the benefits. يرسل السماء عليكم مدرارا ويمددكم بأموال وبنين. And then he says, which I feel like that's like more bodily pleasures, having children and wealth and gardens and anhar. And then he again goes back, I think, to like the not israr. Yeah, israr. ما لكم لا ترجون لله وقارا, that we should embody waqar towards Allah. And then he goes back to the bodily things. وَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا, and that God created you this way. And then he says that he created the earth for you so that you can do such and such. So it's always like the one thing is about the inner world and how we should relate to Allah, like He's Ghaffar, and that you should have waqar towards Him. And then the other thing is look at all these things that He has given you, which is like more jihara.
Yeah, really good thinking, Zanira. So now take it one step further and try and think of like, how is that all Furqan? That's all Furqan. And then the Quran will talk about the same things, but in a different way. That's to do with Jama', right? Let me give you one example right now, Zanira. Let's take it one step further. So you stopped at وَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا أَلَمْ تَرَوْا كَيْفَ خَلَقَ اللَّهُ سَبْعَ سَمَوَاتٍ طِبَاقًا وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ فِيهِنَّ نُورًا وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ سِرَاجًا وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ فِيهِنَّ نُورًا وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ سِرَاجًا. That's the Furqan of the Qamar and the Shams, right? And of course, in Surah Al-Qiyamah, وَجُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرِ, right? Then if you go back to the Fuss itself, that is what he is talking about. لَيْلًا مِنْ حَيْثُ عُقُولُهُمْ وَرُوحَانِيَتِهِمْ. So he's talking about, look at how your uqul and your arwah are all one. There's a tawheed between them. Who is making your arwah one? Who is making your uqul one? That's Allah. Who's the one who made your aql? Who's the one who brought forth your arwah? That's in this ayah. وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ, which is, you might say, the uqul. فِيهِنَّ نُورًا وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ سِرَاجًا. And the shams are your arwah, because the spirits are luminous. It's basically this ayah. So he's talking to them and saying, don't you see the moon, how it has a light? And don't you see how he made the sun to be a siraja? So he's talking about the tawheed. He's talking about how there's a tawheed between them. It's not made by accident. Sorry, Khalid, is that you?
Yeah.
Okay, wait, so let me say one thing and then ask the question. So I'll just finish this. وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ فِيهِنَّ. And yet, Ghada, you put the surah in the chat box. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا. That's Jama'. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا. What's تَلَاهَا?
Follows the sun. Like I think Ha goes
Follow,
back to the sun.
follows it. Follows it. Here, the moon and the sun are separated. But in the Quran, the moon follows the sun in union. So that's Jama'. Right? And likewise, he's saying here, he's separating the uqul, the intellect, and your arwah, because by the way, aql is connected to ruh. That's why he says them both. Aql and ruh are very closely connected. He separates them from your bodies. Sorry, Ghada, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to ask when it said وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ فِيهِنَّ نُورًا وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ سِرَاجًا. النور is للشمس والسراج لليل. So مثل كأنه معكوسة. It's like kind of flipped.
But why is the shams for the night?
This is why I'm asking. It's a little bit confusing.
No, the shams is not for the night. No. So
You mean,
the sun is for the day.
yeah, but the siraj is for the night, no?
No. Siraj just means blazingly bright. So the shams is the siraja. So actually siraja is a lamp. He made the sun a lamp. Ah, so you're saying why is it a lamp? Good question.
It's kind of al-qamar is for the night and then the sun is for the day. So usually we use the siraj in the night and then the nur is the nur al-shams.
That's a good question. So the Mufassirun do talk about the difference between like Nur and Siraj, for example. I'd have to go back and see what they said exactly, right? But like one of them is like a soft light, the other one's like a harsher light. But the Siraj, it's more like if there wasn't a sun, we'd all be in darkness. So it's not to do with night. It's more to do with like when you have a siraj, you can see everything clearly. So that's why the sun is called a siraj. It's not. It's not.
Because
It's not.
it's
Sorry,
also like,
Samira?
the siraj is like a lamp, and lamp burns like it has its own fire. Whereas Noor is just
Exactly.
something, it's just a light. It could have its own light, or it could be a reflective light, which is the most light.
And then the Mufassirun also talk more about that Zanira, but I just can't remember what they say at the moment. But yeah, that's what I understood as well. Um, but like, if we go back to the Fas, then you can see how this ayah is connected to those words that he's saying, and how he has separated the sun from the moon. And so he's also separated the uqul and the arwah from the bodies, which is the next part. One nahara, and by day. And day is so if the night is a symbol for the spirits and the ghaib, right? The day is a symbol for the shahada, what you see with your eyes, and physical bodies and forms. دعاهم أيضا من حيث ظاهر صورهم وجثثهم. Or yeah, I think that's the word. So then he called to them by day with regard to their forms and their really interesting word, juthas. What does that word mean?
Corpse? Does it mean corpse?
Corpse. And where is that in the surah?
I mean, I don't know that.
والله أنبتكم من الأرض نباتا ثم يعيدكم فيها ويخرجكم إخراجا. That's why he says corpse, because you're dead until Yom Qiyamah, aren't you? When you die. And so if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause you to grow like a plant, and this is actually the prophetic understanding, like our bodies grow in the earth like plants until Allah makes it rain, and then we come forth from the ground. That's the prophetic understanding. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regrows our bodies in the ground. Apparently there's like a part of our body, I forgot what it's called, like the colics. It doesn't disappear. It's like in the backbone. And that's the part he uses to recreate us. And so resurrect us from that piece. Ajib. So those words are a reference to these ayat. Wallahu anbatakum min al-ardi nabata. He will cause you to grow like a plant, right? Again, which is a reference to the tawheed of your bodies. Don't you see that just as he caused you to undergo growth in your stages, what are the stages? وَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ what? أَطْوَارًا, right? So the implication of that is that if Allah caused you to grow in stages from the nutfa, which is the combination between the sperm drop and the egg, to the fleshy mass, to the fetus, and to an actual body, those are the atwara, right? That's the atwar. وَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا. So if that's the case, why wouldn't it happen again? He'll do the same thing to you again when you are in the earth. وَاللَّهُ جَعَلَ لَكُمْ الْأَرْضَ بِسَاطًا. Sorry, I'll go before that. وَاللَّهُ أَنبَتَكُمْ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ نَبَاتًا. He will cause you to undergo growth in atwara, in stages in the barzakh again. So there's a tawheed between them. Why wouldn't that happen again? That's the call he made, right? So he called to them, to their arwah on the one hand, then he calls their bodies on the other hand. He called to them about the ghaib, then he called to them about the shahada. He called to them with regard to their uqul, then he called to them with regard to their suwar, which are their forms. That's why it says, Wallahu ambatkum min al-ardi nabata. He will regrow your forms, your bodies, right? This language, this flavor is a what kind of flavor? It's a Furqani flavor. Everything Sayyidina Hassan is saying is true. We accuse him of anything else. He's saying everything that's true, but the language he uses, the speech, especially in Arabic, this is Qur'ani language. It's not Qur'ani language. They wouldn't respond to this kind of a language. This is not what they would respond to. Does that kind of make sense? So he says, وَمَا جَمَعَ فَالْدَعْوَةِ لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ, right? He didn't combine the call. فَنَفَرَتْ بُوَاتِنَهُم. So their inward selves rejected it. نفرت بواتنهم لهذا الفرقان فزادهم فرارا. That increased them in running away from his call. He came with a Furqani call, so they gave a Furqani response, which is to not go to him, which is to run further away. Does that kind of make sense? Yes, no, maybe. Definitely brain overload. I understand that, but
Siddhi?
yes.
So I am having trouble understanding how we are looking at the Quran as only a place of gathering, because it also uses Furqani language, right? When it talks about the day and night, and so we can also look at the Quran when it talks about opposites, right? So as kind of creating differentiation and distinguishing between opposites. So I'm
Yes. No. Please ask. This is a good point.
So
Yes.
I'm just having trouble understanding how we can categorically say that, you know, they only understood like they were at the maqam of the Quran, so they only understood bringing the two things together. And when Prophet Nuh salam was using a Furqani language, I mean, it's not the distinction is not that clear, right? Because the Quran also uses Furqani language, and it is the Furqan. It teaches us to differentiate, right? So I'm not sure if I when I read the Quran and I see, you know, when it talks about opposites, the day and night, the moon and the sun, you can also look at it as kind of creating a distinction between opposites. So how can we only look at the Quran as being a place of, you know, gathering or coming together?
Okay. What a brilliant question. So let's tackle this. Let's start with this. If I highlight this, can you see this or not?
Yes.
Yes.
I can see.
What's it say?
It says that the Quran has within it the Furqan, but the Furqan does not have within it the Quran.
Let's start right there. So the Quran contains Furqan. So the Shaykh, what it says in the Futhat, now we go back to the Futhat, that there are two modes in which you can read the Quran. So you're right, Sana. The Quran can be read as Quran, as a means of gathering the haqa'iq together and interrelating one verse to another, or it can be, so this is called its Quranic mode, or it can be read in its Furqani mode, in its mode of separation, right? And so you are separating one thing from another. It can do both. So of course the Quran is not just Quran. That would be a mistake to say that. It contains both. But Quran as a station and as a book contains within it Furqan. It contains it. You see? So even when the Quran is going to express something that's Furqani, it will express it in a manner that is peculiar to its own style. We can talk about lots of things that are Furqan in the Quran, but just notice the way it is expressed. Pay attention to the way Allah says it. He will only say it in a manner that is particular to the Quran, which is why it's called a what? A mu'jiza. That is its i'jaz. He will express the Quran in ways that no one else can express it. That's the meaning of it being Quran. Whereas I don't recall that being the ijaz of other revelations necessarily with regard to the written word, not necessarily. Because Furqan, the previous books, don't contain Quran. But Quran as a book and as a maqam contains Furqan. So you can read it as a Furqan, yes, certainly. You can also read it as a Quran, but pay attention to the language. It will never give you like a pure Furqan. So Sayyidina alayhi salam, he says, Layla wa Nahara, that's a pure Furqan. Jihara, Israra, that's a pure Furqan, pure. I will put it to you, and I will submit that in the Quran, even though it obviously does contain Furqan, you can't show me a verse that has pure Furqan. Not really. And then that's the perfect balance. And then other verses will contain other proportions and balances, other ratios between tanzih and tashbih. But it will always be combined in some manner, even when you find Furqan. And this will be a wonderful question to explore by looking at actual other ayat. Let's put this idea to the test. Does that make sense?
But when you say, Sidi, that Dawatu Qaumi Layla wa Nahara, how is that pure Furqan when there's a wow in between and then he is bringing both of those things together by day and by night? So he's combining both of them. So how is that pure Furqani language?
Okay, good. He's doing both of them. He has not combined them. He's doing both of them. That's not a Muhammadi combination. I want to put this to the rest of the group. What is a Muhammadi combination? That's not a Muhammadi combination. If I do both, that's not a combination. I can do two things.
It's like the time of blending almost, like duha and I guess even asr. But it's just like Layla and Nahar, like the two ends, the two extremes almost of the daytime.
Where did I see this? Because it's in the Arabic. 1 second. Yes. Okay, I'm going to highlight this now. This is a Muhammadi. I'm sorry about the text covering that up. That's silly. Let me see if I can just do this. Okay, that's better. That is a wait. Oh, فما دعا محمد قومه ليلا ونهارا. Yes. Let me just do this instead. Okay, but okay, here. Sorry. So I can't highlight for obvious reasons, but go to the next line. Sorry. Okay, so that is a Muhammadan combination. Who wants to read that?
I can read. فما دعا محمد قومه ليلا ونهارا بل دعاهم ليلا في نهار ونهارا في ليل.
Yes.
Okay.
That now is what you call Jama'a. In the sense that is meant by Sheikh Al-Akbar, that is called a Muhammadan gathering. بل دعاهم ليلا في النهار والنهار في الليل.
What is the reference in Quran for this one?
What is the reference in the Quran? وَالْفَجْرِ.
Like it's clear for Sayyidina Nuh, he said وَدَعَاهُمْ لَيْلًا وَنَهَارًا. But for Sayyidina Muhammad, I cannot recall a certain, or I cannot remember exactly. There is another.
You won't find the words da'awtu, but the reference is وَالْفَجْرِ.
وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ.
وَالْفَجْرِ. Because what is Fajr? What's Fajr?
It is sunrise. It is the time of sunrise.
No, but say it like him. Fajr is laylan fi nahar.
Got it.
Fajr
So
is
it's a transition. It's exactly the transition between night today, between dark and light.
That transition point is the layl fi nahar, and then what's maghrib? Nahar fi layl.
Ah, got it. The transition from dark to from day to night.
So if Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam called them Layla wa Nahara, Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salam called them Fajr wa Maghrib.
Ah, so you mean within Sayyidina Nuh, it was a kind of a separation, Layl from Nahar, but within Sayyidina Muhammad Da'wah, it was more of a combination of both.
Because at
At
Fajr and Maghrib,
point.
yes, because at Fajr and Maghrib, the night and the day meet each other.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sana, does that make sense?
Yes, I pulled up the verse from Surah Al-Hadid also, which came to my mind, that he merges the night into day and the day into night.
Yes, yuliju, right?
وَيُولِجُ النَّهَارَ فِي اللَّيْلِ وَهُوَ عَلِيمٌ.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
Quran. That's Quran. That's not Furqan. Sayyidina Suhair, go ahead. And by the way, where have you been? MashaAllah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Good to see you again.
Likewise, good to hear you and see you. Well, I'm not seeing you, but inshallah we'll see you soon.
Ya Rab, Ya Rab.
Yeah. So yeah, actually I've been traveling for a very long time and I finally got back. I'm back in San Diego. Still very busy, but I can make time for Alhamdulillah for these amazing lessons. So
Allah barak feek, a true salik, mashallah. A true traveler.
Barakallah fikum. May Allah accept. So again, Jazakumullah khairan for the amazing lesson. So my comment was, could we also say that the Prophet ﷺ would call people privately during the day and would call them towards Allah publicly during the night, based on something you said earlier?
Ah, that's not impossible. Do you find that in the seerah, just out of interest?
Yeah, I mean, so
that would be an
I
interesting
believe
question to ask.
I believe many of for example, the gathering of Aqaba that took place between the Ansar and the Prophet ﷺ, it was a very private gathering between the delegation of Ansar who came to Mecca, but it was a private gathering, right? But it was, if I recall, it was during the day, it was during the Mawsam of Hajj. So and I think that there are many examples, but I just have to think about.
Yeah, possibly. But so to go along with the example Sheikh Al-Akbar is giving us, how did Muhammad ﷺ call publicly in the private, and how did he call privately in the public? That would be the question that we'd have to think about. But it could also be what you're saying, because he calls them night in the day and day in the night. So how did he also call to them privately in public, and how did he call to them publicly in private? That would be an interesting question to just think about, because I don't have an answer myself, but that's the kind of thing he's answering. And Allah barak feek for drawing our attention to this, because it's also interesting to think of how he did things in the seerah, because you're right to draw our attention to the seerah, because he does these kinds of things all the time. When he goes on the conquest of Mecca, and finally he does the futuhat, the Fatah al-Mecca, and he's on his horse. There's a Sahabi, I'm sorry I forgot his name, but he said this is a day of bloodshed. And Muhammad told him, no, this will be a day of forgiveness and rahmah. Who was that Sahabi? If anyone is more knowledgeable in seerah than me, right? This is in the seerah. Because now he thought this is the day he could take revenge for all that Quraysh did to him. So what does he do? If anyone remembers that story. Because this Sahabi is holding the banner. So now you can't have someone like that going into Mecca and representing the banner. So you must take it away from him. That's Furqan. But he's a man of Quran, so what does he do? He gives it to his son. So he passes the banner on to his son, so it remains within the family. That's Quran and Furqan. And more precisely, that's Furqan within Quran. He separated the banner from the father, gave it to the son, thus keeping it in the family and in the family honor, maintaining the family honor. This is precisely Quran and Furqan in Quran. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And everyone else? So he does that kind of thing all the time. All the time. He does this kind of thing all the time, because he's the walking Quran, isn't he?
Yes.
So you'll find this sort of thing everywhere in the hadith about him, mentioned by him, and in the seerah. So it'll be interesting to see where we notice these kinds of things, right? So that's a Muhammadi hal trait and a state, right? You know, I wanted to cover this part, this part here, because I thought the last passage was more relevant, but now we can get on to this. But I'm getting the sense that maybe we've all had enough for today, right?
There was just one little thing was been reminding me when you're talking about, and I'm just looking it up for a second, which is where he says, oh, what was it? If I can find it, where the Prophet ﷺ says something like, and where is it? وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ جَاءُوكَ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوا اللَّهَ وَاسْتَغْفِرُوا اللَّهَ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ وَجْدَ اللَّهُ تَوَّابًا رَحِيمًا.
Oh my gosh.
Something about whether, is it that? Basically, it's when there's something about the Prophet ﷺ is in you, and there's some that must have some kind of connection to this whole within that we're talking about here.
Is it إِنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ?
Sorry?
So that verse isn't in this fuss, Hannah, but there's no question
No,
that's
it's not. No, it's not. It's not in that fuss. It's not in the fuss. And it was just making me think about it when you were talking about
but it's connected. It's strongly connected. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things going on in that ayah, by the way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things, but there's a lot of jama' in that ayah as well. Exactly. There's a lot of jama' happening in that ayah. Because if they only came to you, O Muhammad, if they came to the messenger, Allah would have forgiven them. Because Muhammad is on the form of Allah.
Yeah.
And there's lots of ayat like that. And he talks about this a lot, actually, in other places. Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah, really well spotted. Thank you, Hannah. That's a perfect example, actually.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
It's from Shaykh Hisham. He was always talking about that one, mashallah. Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. I mean, yeah, guys, so I'm getting the sense that we've had enough, but I wanted to get into this, so I'll do it next time, inshallah. I'm hoping this was a bit more clear. A bit more?
Yes, yeah, from my side.
Okay, brilliant. And everyone else? Any concluding questions?
I do have a question, but it is not like a substantial question. It's rather something on the procedure itself in terms of the sequence of the lessons. So this is my first lesson. What would you recommend me to listen to? Shall I listen to the recording of the previous sessions of Nuh only, or other if I can? What would be the minimum required?
No, yeah. So just to join us on this fuss, you can just start from the beginning of the first recording of this fuss. You don't have to go all the way back to the first session on the Fusus Al Hikam. No, that's fine.
Because what I'm doing currently is basically that I'm trying every day to recite certain surah of Quran, like to keep reciting the same surah for a long time. So to be able really to not only to conceptualize it, but to internalize it and understanding the hidden meaning of every phrase. So I'm gonna make a combination between this class in addition to my own recitation of Surah Nuh in every prayer. No, every day, not every prayer, every day.
That's beautiful. No, I think that would be lovely. Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you.